Thank you for joining us as we celebrate Women's History Month. Since 1995, during President Clinton's administration, U.S. presidents have issued a series of annual proclamations designating the month of March as Women's History Month. These proclamations celebrate the contributions women have made to our country and recognize the achievements made by women over the course of history in a variety of fields. My name is Stephanie Street, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Clinton Foundation. And today, at the Center Observing Women's History Month, we are so thrilled to celebrate women who have worked hard, who perhaps have broken a few glass ceilings along the way, and who've made a real difference in our communities. Today's program is held in partnership with AR Girls Lead, a movement started by women serving in the Arkansas House of Representatives. And I can't think of a more fitting Women's History Month partner. We are so grateful for their service and their commitment to forging a path forward to include the full participation of girls and women. I'm thrilled to welcome our guests this morning. First, my friend, Representative Nicole Clowney, who is serving in her second term in the Arkansas House. She represents District 86, which includes portions of Washington County. Representative Michelle Gray is serving her fourth term in the Arkansas House of Representatives. She represents District 62, which includes portions of Izard, Sharp, Stone, and Independence counties. Thank you both so much for joining us in the middle of this very busy legislative session. I know your time is a very precious commodity. And our fearless moderator today is the remarkable City Director, Kathy Webb. Kathy represents Ward 3 on the Little Rock City Board. She previously served 3 terms in the Arkansas General Assembly as a state representative from 2007 through 2012. Ladies, thank you again so much for taking time to be with us this morning. And now, Kathy, I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And we are here, albeit virtually, at the Clinton Center, an institution built specifically to encourage public service. In talking about his center, President Clinton said, "If you take a single message from your visit here, I hope it is that public service is a noble calling and doing the people's business is a solemn trust." I agree, and I'm honored to have served the people of Little Rock as a state representative and now as a city director. And I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to Representative Gray and Representative Clowney for their service. Thank you both for joining us here today to help inspire this next generation of public servants. And students, we want to bring you into the conversation as well later on, so be thinking about what you'd like to ask representatives. First, we'd like to start with a short video. So Nate, if you will roll the video, we'll see that first.
I knew nothing about politics whatsoever, nothing. Do you know I had to Google where the Capitol was? I didn't even know where the Capitol was at. And I kind of felt like that child in the classroom who wasn't the smartest kid in class. And I was like, I'm gonna be in a room full of people who know this, who live this, and I was terrified of that whole sensation. I have not yet felt stupid here.
After I had a meeting one day with a legislator from Fayetteville, I was telling my daughter about it. She was 6 at the time. And she asked me what a legislator was, and I told her it was a person who makes laws. She said, "That sounds like an all-boy job." And that was the moment where I said, she is already questioning whether this is something that she could do in her future. What would I tell her if she were in my position and holding herself back? So I said, this is not an all-boy job, and Mama will show you that. So that was the day that I actually decided to run for office.
If I could go back and tell young Sonia Barker one thing, well, I could write a book. Overarching, it would probably be, don't be so shy. Be brave, be courageous, be who you are, regardless of what society expects. I know as a young kid I was shy and introverted, and I think that's okay. I think you can be those things. Don't let that hold you back.
When I was a young girl and grew up the only, and I hate always being the black girl. Now I love being black and I love being a girl, I love being a woman, but when you are the only one, it's an automatic feeling of isolation sometimes. And it wasn't until I got older that I felt confident in my skin and comfortable being in any room and felt like I could do whatever anybody else could do.
Don't be afraid to speak your mind. Don't be afraid that if you have an idea, if someone else tells you that don't do it, don't be afraid. Say it, do it, act upon it.
Don't take life so serious. Enjoy life a little more along the way, and you're a treasure and you're worth more than you think that you are.
Thank you. Great video. I want to start with a question that I get asked all the time. And while Representative Clowney partially answered it, we'll ask her to expand on that a little bit more in a minute. When did you know that you wanted to run for office? And have you always known, or is it something that came to you more recently? And we would like to start the question with Representative Gray.
Yes. Thank you, Kathy. So this, to be honest, I'm still not even sure that I want to be running for office, but I helped Senator, she's a senator now, Senator Missy Irvin, run for office back, I believe in 2010. It was a very hard campaign and she did end up winning. And I remember watching her thinking, if she can do this, maybe someday. I had young kids, didn't really think it was an option. And then I had a legislator call me a couple of years later and ask me to run. And so I spent a lot of time trying to decide, is this something that I want to do? Can I do it? So really, it's just been in the last 10 years or so that I decided I wanted to do it.
Thank you. Representative Clowney, how about you?
My story is pretty similar. I was always very interested in politics and following along, and never saw myself as somebody who would be inside of it, but would sort of be on the outside looking in. And like Representative Gray, I found myself, sort of helping a legislator and starting to visit the Capitol and working on some issues. And I just remember the last day of session that I was down there a few years ago, looking around and thinking, oh, this would be so cool to do one day. But like Representative Gray said, but probably not today, not anytime soon. And I had all sorts of doubts. But the stars kind of aligned, and the representative that represented me was going to make the move over to the Senate, was going to run for the state Senate. So the seat opened up, and it was sort of a now or never situation. And it would have been never had it not been for my daughter questioning, what it would really take to be a legislator. She assumed, because from our part of the state, there were, from Fayetteville was represented by all male representatives. She had seen that. And she was commenting on it as early as 6 years old. And, like y'all just heard, that was enough for me to finally make the jump.
Thank you both for that. My second question is usually the follow-up question to the first one. Why? Why did you decide? And it's often followed up with the question, have you lost your mind? So Representative Clowney, we'll start with you on this one.
I lose my mind daily right now in this job. Yes. But the why for me is my girls. I have two little girls now, they're 10 and 6, and my constituents. Every weekend right now when we're in Little Rock during the week, and I come home on the weekends, and I hear from folks, from my neighbors who are so concerned about various things that are happening in their state. As you can imagine, now more than ever with the pandemic, there are so many people in so much need of help. And while it may sound, it may sound crazy to want to go to Little Rock and do this work, I actually think that I would lose my mind if I weren't able to do it. It's so fulfilling to have somebody come to you with a problem and be able to help. It's so fulfilling to, I'm often outnumbered at the Capitol in terms of my beliefs and what my district wants me to bring into the halls of that Capitol, what my district wants me to say in the rooms that a lot of colleagues aren't saying. I'm often outnumbered. And I think that it would be so hard to watch those things go unsaid, that I just feel so fortunate to be able to say those things, to be able to bring issues to light, to be able to represent my district in a way that I know matters, even when we don't end up, on the prevailing side of issues at the end of the day. Their voices are heard, and that makes me so fulfilled. That's my why.
Thank you. And Representative Gray, why did you take on this role?
Yes, well, like I said earlier, I had a sitting legislator call me. I remember where I was in a vehicle. I mean, I remember everything about it. It was so shocking, but asked me if I would run. And I would have been and did run a 2-term incumbent and won. But I remember I stayed in my house for about 2 weeks, just sick at my stomach. Should I do this? Can I do this? Like Representative Vaught said in the video, just wondering, am I smart enough? Being a female down there, will I be taken seriously? All these things went through my head. And I finally just decided to run because the direction of the national politics and where they were going. And I think I was a little bit naive as well to think that I could do more on the state level than what we can actually do. I learned that after taking office. And then just some of the votes and things that had been done on the state level. So like Representative Clowney, I was on the outside looking in, watching what was going on and didn't necessarily agree. So it was a very hard decision to decide to run.
Well, and you both touched on the next question I want to ask, but was there ever a point when you said, what if I fail? And if so, how did you push through that? Representative Gray, can we start with you on this one?
Oh, you bet. And that's, like I said, I sat 2 weeks in my house thinking I can't do this. I'm not going to be smart enough. And I remember walking in the chamber that first day, and I walked in from behind the speaker's podium. And when you walk in, and it's almost like a theater seating where it's kind of slanted up, and it slants up, and you look up and you see that dome there. And it was overwhelming looking up, seeing that, thinking, oh my goodness, now I'm getting ready to affect policy and change, not just for my district, but the entire state. And I mean, it makes you take pause and realize that what you're doing has a lot of consequences, and there's a lot weighing on you. I think for me, just my constituents and hearing from them and knowing that I'm representing them, and you can't represent them all 100% of the time, but the majority of them, it's kept me going.
Thank you. Representative Clowney?
Yeah, for sure. I had a lot of doubts. I had a lot of self-doubt starting out. Representative Gray mentioned that she received a phone call asking her to run for office. And, there are all of these statistics about how many times women have to be asked to run for office before they agree, relative to men. And, I think it's something like women have to be asked on average 9 times before they say yes. And I think that I and a lot of my women colleagues have shared the same thing, that, before we decided to run, we really wanted to make sure that we knew everything about everything, that we were 100% prepared, had all of the answers, had no room for error. And that's literally impossible, right? Nobody can be that way. Nobody can be that prepared. And so at some point you just have to say to yourself, I don't know everything. I am going to learn and listen to as much as I can and push through. But I think what was so, I've never seen the video that we just saw, those clips that we just saw of all of those legislators. And I think that there was really a common thread, which was you have to trust that you are bringing something valuable. I think every one of those women, including, me, has felt like, oh my gosh, why am I the only one in the room who feels this way? There must be something wrong with the way that I'm thinking. And I remember thinking that a lot when I was growing up, thinking I'm the only one in the room who thinks this, what's wrong with me? And I think over the course of my life, that's changed. And I'm starting to trust that, that we need more people in the room who are thinking differently than everybody else. I think women in particular bring that. I have been in rooms where Representative Gray has been the one person who is saying the thing that needs said that nobody else would have said. Feeling on the outside like that, feeling like you're the only one in the room can feel really scary and can make you doubt yourself. But I would just say that to the extent that you can, lean into that feeling and trust it, because if you are thinking something different, it's valuable and it almost certainly needs to be heard. So that's sort of what pushes me through.
Thank you. Who inspired you along the way? We'll start with Representative Gray again.
So this is an interesting one. I'm going to go back all the way to like the 90s. I'm showing my age here. I know I'm definitely older than Representative Clowney, but Margaret Thatcher, and I know that sounds odd, but she was in office when I was a teenager. And I remember we had to get up and give almost like a book report, but a presentation. We had to dress up and everything as someone that was inspiring to us. And her being the first female Prime Minister of the UK was really inspirational to me. And that about 2 years later, after I did that, then I actually went to Girls State and was elected senator. So I think Attorney General Leslie Rutledge was there with me that year, and she was elected Chief Justice, I believe. So it's a small world, but so she definitely inspired me along the way as a young adult. And just like Senator Missy Irvin and others that I've watched in office.
Well, and we have the common thread of Girls State, because before you were at Girls State, many years before that, I was at Girls State, and I was an associate justice of the Supreme Court during my time there. So Representative Clowney, who inspired you?
So there are so many political figures who have inspired me, but really the person that I go back to the most often in the course of my work is my mom. And my mom was a special ed teacher. She taught special education her entire career in a public school in Oklahoma, which is where I grew up, and taught me so much about really about not being able to judge people really until you understand kind of the entirety of the struggles that they're facing, of the things that they're living with day in and day out. She provided such a loving and safe and secure home for my family, while at the same time really constantly reminding us how fortunate we were to have that, and how many people in our community didn't have that, and what they would need to succeed, and how we could help them break cycles of poverty, of violence, of addiction, of all of those things. So she's the one who I go back to the most in the course of my job as a legislator and as a mom.
What would you say to young people, especially young women, who might be interested in public service at some level? Representative Clowney, we'll start with you.
So first thing, if you're interested in public service, you are qualified for public service. That's, sort of the big takeaway for me. If you want to do it, go for it. We need people who want to do this job. I would say trust your voice, like I was saying earlier, and surround yourself, find a group of friends. It doesn't even have to be very big, but find friends who build you up and cheer you on. None of us can do this on our own. And I know that Representative Gray and I each have in the House sort of a buddy, right? Like a best buddy that we came in our first term with. And truly, I don't know how I could do this job alone. I wear little friendship bracelets on my wrist every day from friends at home who are cheering me on. You're never too old to need your girlfriends. And so surround yourself with girlfriends who will cheer you on.
Thank you. Representative Gray.
Oh yeah, no, I say if public service is something you're interested in, definitely go for it. I mean, there are so many different levels. And when I think public service, it could be, and that's, something I don't think that I really understood for most of my adult life, is there are so many different levels of public service. Yesterday, Representative Deanne Vaught, so just like Representative Clowney said, we came in with a buddy. She's my buddy. to the point that, she's one of my best friends and she's my roommate at Capitol Hill even. But she had some legislation yesterday for DACA teachers. And I stood on the Capitol steps with her. And I don't remember the lady's name that was emceeing it, but she was with United First. And they were really pushing for this. And I remember looking at her thinking, that's probably an unpaid role. She's advocating for what she believes in. And it inspired me yesterday, just watching her. So there are all different levels of public service. You don't have to be an elected official. You might want to work at Department of Human Services and help with foster children. You might want to be an advocate. So find that pathway that works best for you. And I say go for it.
Thank you. And thank you for mentioning that bill. Representative Vaught had a bill this week that my organization was very interested in, and I saw that it passed the Senate unanimously. And we're really excited because that's going to help a lot of people in Arkansas with that, both of these bills that she had. So Nate, I'm wondering if we have any questions in the chat box or any questions from the students. I know you may have one, and I've got a few more if we don't.
Thanks, Director Webb. Yeah, thank you all for joining us. I know we've got a few students from the On the Go Academy out of Arizona. Welcome. Thank you for being here this morning. And I know we have Mrs. West's class all the way from Hot Springs with us today. So just welcome. Thank you for being here. If you have any questions, we have a break now and a break at the end of the program to address questions from the students or teachers. Feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your webinar screen to text questions or the chat box. So we'll be monitoring that throughout the program. So if you don't have any at the moment, that's fine. I wanted to pose one question though to the representatives. Again, thank you so much for being here. We recently had a workshop with our student presidential leaders class. It's about 15 really bright young leaders that are trying to make a difference. And something came up in our conversations that for me was something I didn't think a lot about, and that was social media. Can you share how social media has affected your approach to politics and staying connected with your constituents?
Just go ahead, either one.
I was looking at Representative Clowney. I was going to see if she'd jump in first, but I wasn't on Facebook and I didn't do Twitter, any of those things when I ran for office. And so I did end up getting on both of those platforms and was very active. And it was a great way for me to reach my constituents. Now I'm a little different. During the pandemic this past year, I got overwhelmed. It didn't matter what I posted. Everything I was reading was negative. Everything I posted, I was getting criticized for. And I was spending hours a day defending all kinds of things. And so to be honest, I've actually exited social media. I will go on every once in a while, kind of see what's going on. But for the most part right now, I think what's best for me is to not be on social media. I do understand it plays an important role. So I work through email and text most right now.
Thank you. Representative Clowney?
Yeah, so I agree with Representative Gray. Social media is really a blessing and a curse. During COVID, sort of the height of the pandemic, I was using social media to communicate really just facts to my constituents. Just here are numbers for the day, here are the major announcements, and maybe a graphic about where we were with COVID. That was really heartbreaking and hard to do for the reasons Representative Gray mentioned. It's sort of the most milquetoast kind of here are the facts of today post, and then you just get these comments that are, why do you want to kill our Kansans? I mean, just really wild things. And I think that social media has the ability to kind of take our worst impulses and make them really public and make them permanent. And so oftentimes when people are very emotional about a thing, they will jump from saying, even I disagree with your opinion on this issue, to questioning your motives, to questioning your intentions, to questioning your integrity as a human being. And that is a lot easier to do on social media than it is when you're texting somebody or emailing them, or of course, speaking to them face to face. So it's really, really hard to balance. This summer when I was, over COVID, excuse me, when I was communicating that information to my constituents, I kept it up every day because I felt like it was that important. As we've gotten deeper into session, social media almost always ends poorly for most of us. Even I have put things on social media that I've sometimes thought, oh, I should have sat with that before I hit publish. It's easy to let your emotions get the best of you on social media, and it's certainly easy for commenters to let their emotions get the best of them, particularly if they don't know you personally. So when you're communicating with your legislators, or really with anybody on social media, just keep that in mind. We are all just human beings who at the end of the day really do truly take what y'all say seriously, and it can sometimes be so much that we have to step away.
Thank you so much for those answers. And I don't have any more Q&A at the moment. So Director Webb, I'll throw it back to you to continue our session. Thanks.
Thanks, Nate. That was a great question. What would you all say to young people who tell you, and you probably get this also from adults, but who just say, I'm not interested in politics. It doesn't have any impact on me. I know that I would get that a lot when I was in the legislature. So what would you say to our audience today? Representative Gray?
I was that child who was clueless about it. I didn't care for my history classes. I think I made a C in political science in college. Matter of fact, it's one of my few C's. And those kids are hard to reach when they don't understand what the need is. I think it's different now, just because of social media and the television. It's everywhere you turn, it's everywhere you go. I walk into my parents' house, news station is on every single time. I have a 12-year-old daughter right now who is very engaged, and she uses the platform TikTok to get, and she'll be on there and she'll get all upset, and she's debating a whole bunch of people over hot issues like abortion. It's different now, I think, than it was when I was younger. So just like I say, she's, about abortion, it's the kids, they've got to get involved now, because their involvement now will shape the outcomes 10, 20 years from now. And they will be our next generation of leaders.
Thank you. Representative Clowney.
Yeah, so Senator Joyce Elliott has a great saying that I borrow whenever I can, which is, you may not be that into politics, but politics is into you. And I think that it's just a good reminder that, even if you're not sitting in front of, the news every night, keeping up with it, politics is affecting your life every day. So as Representative Gray said, kind of the choices are to take an active role in that or not. Every single thing that we do, seemingly throughout our day is kind of touched by politics. That doesn't mean that, we're not individuals making our own choices, but how our homes are built and where we go to school and what those schools look like, and how we're able to get access to food and housing and all of those things. I mean, those are all political decisions at some level, whether that be school board, all the way up to the President of the United States. And so I think sometimes people think politics feels very removed in Washington, D.C. And for the most part, what really is impacting our daily lives, those are decisions that are being made at your local and city and state levels. And so, I am so excited that it's, what I think one of the upsides of social media is just what Representative Gray was saying, that, kids are getting involved earlier and earlier and seeing how these things impact their daily lives and taking an interest. And obviously y'all on this call today are in that group. So thank you.
Thank you both. And I remember when I was in the legislature, I had a constituent who was not interested in politics, told me he was not interested in politics. And then a few months later, he came to me because he had a job that depended on funding from the state. And he was very unhappy that the funding ratio had been changed and had been cut. And I'm glad that my response was not, well, you should have thought about that. a few months ago when you told me you didn't care, but it was a good learning moment to remind somebody just about what you all are saying, that and what Senator Elliott said, politics is into you, even if you're not into politics. So thank you both. And Nate, I'll just rely on you to let me know if we have a Q&A or if we have a question.
Yeah, we actually just got one, if it's okay to hop in and address this to the representatives.
Please do.
From Hot Springs, we have a question. Were either of you in student council in school? Did you start in leadership that young? And I'll ask Representative Clowney to start us, if you don't mind.
I lost my first bid for student council in 8th grade. Somehow put the pieces back together. I rallied, I ran again, and I won. So it felt awful to lose, but got back in the race and eventually won. So let that be a lesson. I was student council vice president my senior year of high school. So I'm sure many of y'all have heard about the 1998 Winter Ball at the Classen High School in Oklahoma City, but that was my work. So, but student council was great training for leadership. I'm making light of having planned a dance, which was funny, but we did a lot of good work. And, I think that is it's a great way to get your feet wet with leadership. There are lots of good ways though, and that's certainly not the only one.
Thank you.
Yes, and no, I'm different than Representative Clowney in that way. I was actually fairly shy when I was in school, and I did not run for a couple of reasons. One, I was shy, and two, I would have had to have run against my friends. I had a class size of 41, and that's just not something I want. I'd rather keep the peace and support my friends than run. So the first office that I've actually held is state representative. I did run for Justice of the Peace 3 times. So I beat you here, Representative Clowney, 3 times, and I lost all 3 times. So not entirely sure why I decided if, I can't win JP, but I can run for state rep and do that. But no, so I'm still learning to come out of my shyness from when I was a child.
Thank you. I think that's all the Q&A I see for the moment. So Director Webb, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay. This is another question that I've thought about over the years, and I want to pose to the two of you. Did the vision of public service that you had, is it matching up to the reality that you're experiencing? And we saw the video with Representative Vaught and some other folks saying, they had not much knowledge of what public service, elected public service would be like. And you all have touched on this a little bit, but there are a lot of factors in this question. Like, did you have any idea it would be so time consuming, the investment that you would have to make? So that's sort of a 2-part question. Did the reality meet what you thought it was going to be? And has it been a lot more demanding than you may have thought it was going to be? So Representative Clowney, if we could start with you.
Yeah, it's a great question. I like Representative Vaught, didn't really know what to expect, but I think the reality has not met my expectations in a couple of ways. I would say one way is a lot of what I knew about politics was from watching the news, was national politics, and Arkansas politics has been different from national politics in that a lot of what we do, a huge percentage of what we do, are not kind of the big hot topic, controversial headline making issues. It's the really nuts and bolts stuff of getting people help that they need, things that our legislators really do mostly agree on. And so it's not as contentious, I think. I hope that won't change. I'm a little bit nervous that will change, but I'm hopeful that we can keep it that way. The other thing that surprised me is how much work really does get done behind the scenes. Almost everything that we do, I think, are things that maybe a small handful of folks will ever know that we've done. I think a lot of times politicians get a bad rap for wanting the spotlight and wanting credit and all of these things, when in fact, so much of our work is done in sort of dark corners of the Capitol, which sounds sketchier than it is. It's just because it's late and we're working late. But I think that, that is so much kind of behind the scenes, just head down, hard work, under the radar stuff that gets done. That has surprised me, pleasantly surprised me, actually. In terms of the sort of the workload and the time commitment, the only thing that surprised me there is how hard it is for me to turn my brain off at the end of the day. I really, when I come home on the weekends, I try really hard to be present with my husband, with my girls, and just here and focused. And it's a challenge to kind of turn off all of the, especially right now, all of the pain and the struggles that I know are out there. It can be very, very hard to step away from that at the end of the day. But I try as hard as I can, because it's the only way I can keep going, sort of big picture. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And for me, it's completely different actually serving than what I thought it would be like. I think I said earlier, I used the word naive to describe myself. I came in thinking I could, change the world. And then I realized real quickly that I was one of 100. Most of us are type A personalities. And the most important thing down there is relationships and building trust with your colleagues and actually having conversations. I can't tell you how many bills that I've written that, I thought they sounded great. And then after discussion and talking with others, you work through it and you find issues in your bill, new things that you needed to address. I guess what we say is that's, where the sausage is made. And like Representative Clowney said, in the dark corners of the Capitol, a lot of it'll happen. I mean, you're on your way from the chamber to a meeting room and you're just in discussion with the colleague walking, and it hits you, oh, I need to do this, or I need to change this. So I think just the difficulty of actually passing meaningful legislation, I was not expecting that. And I wasn't expecting the constituents, the amount of time it would take every day to work with constituents, because I had never personally reached out to my state representative and asked for help on anything. But I think that's also it's the most exhausting part of what we do, but it's also the most rewarding part of what we do. When you've got someone who's struggling, which I know Representative Clowney has probably received hundreds of emails, the same as most of the rest of us, with people that aren't able to get their unemployment insurance approved. And I've got some sitting right now on 12, 14 weeks, and they're struggling, about to lose everything. And when we can help even that one person get their unemployment pushed through, or help them with their disability, or help them, almost, not I won't say fast track, but expedite getting their Medicaid when it's something they really need. So that, that's been something that's positive that I didn't expect to happen, that I was able to do. And I tell you, I tell people this all the time, that, politics is so partisan right now. And it has been ever since I've been in the legislature, but that's not really, aside from this session, I'm not going to lie about that. This session's there's been some very partisan things happen. But it's my tenure here, it's been more urban versus rural. So what works in an urban area doesn't necessarily work in a rural area, and vice versa. It's not been Democrat versus Republican on most issues. I mean, when you're talking about schools, healthcare, things that aren't political, everything that you do affects urban different than it does rural. So, and we can't legislate for one or the other. And so we have to find that balance that works for both.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I had another question or two come in through the chat. It really spoke to what you just spoke to, Representative Gray, about the polarization of politics today and the art form that has always been talking across the aisle, showing respect and being an active listener, when sometimes you're encountering bills, opinions, individuals that might not represent values that reflect your constituents or you as a representative. And students too, and I keep speaking on social media because this generation has grown up behind a screen, and this year has put them behind a screen, and have to deal with so much information, some that are supportive and some that contradict their values. What advice can you share with our students on dealing with difference in a respectful way? And this is to both representatives, but I'd love to throw this question to Representative Gray. How do you advise and how do you lead with practice, if you will, on showing up into difficult rooms, talking about bills that might pose a direct conflict to your values?
Oh yeah, and when I came in my first session in 2015, I think I was much more partisan than I am even now. And there's one thing that always sticks out in my head is how we were a month or two into my first session, and I came in with Representative Vivian Flowers, and you saw her, she was in that video. And I remember she was working on a bill for funding for Pine Bluff, and she'd met with the governor a couple times. She thought she had everything handled, and then at the last minute was told that the bill was not going to pass. And what I learned in that moment, I still remember standing in the chamber when I found that out. I was the only Republican, I think we had 67 in the House. I was the only Republican that voted with her on that bill, because I put myself in her shoes and how did she feel and what did she go through to get there. And that actually forged a really good friendship moving forward. And we started talking, and I remember she was, well, you don't have poverty in your district. I'm like, yes, I do. I have poverty. I said, you tell me what yours looks like. So, we talked for hours that day, and I said, well, let me tell you what mine looks like. I was born in a house or a trailer with no running water, no electricity. I grew my parents we grew our own food. And so we forged a friendship, understanding that you got to always put yourself in the other person's shoes to understand where they're coming from. They're not wrong. They just look at things differently or have a different life experiences that put them there. And I'll tell you this too, and I could talk forever on this, but I ran 2 bills yesterday on the House floor for Senator Clark Tucker. I'm a Republican, he's Democrat, and I made the joke, this is what happens when your seatmate runs for Senate, is you get to run their bills. So I intentionally sat between Representative Clark Tucker and Representative Eddie Armstrong my second session. And I did that because of just like the conversations I had with Vivian. I knew that they would give me a different perspective that I didn't get from my Republican caucus. And that helped me grow. And Clark and Eddie helped me grow more as a person and a legislator, just by looking at different viewpoints than I could have ever imagined. So I just say, I would tell kids to be civil. I always tell my daughter, keep your emotions in check. If you can't keep your emotions in check, you're never going to have a good outcome either. But be civil and just always put yourself in the other person's shoes.
Thank you. Representative Clowney, did you want to respond to that as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It is a real challenge in our chamber right now. And just for those of y'all who don't know kind of the math behind it, there are 100 members of the House of Representatives. Right now, there are 78 Republicans and there are 22 Democrats, which means that for purposes of getting legislation passed, any type of legislation, really Republicans can do it 100% on their own. They don't need Democrats for anything. Which means that any sort of relationship building, any reaching across the aisle that happens has to be exactly the kind that Representative Gray just described. How can we make this better? Coming from a place of genuine interest, genuine curiosity. But full disclosure, it is very, very hard to be one of 22 in a party that makes up, 22% of our entire House. It's hard because that doesn't represent the political breakdown of our state. And so it can feel like we are not really representing the people as well as we should be as a chamber. And it can be really hard for relationship building. It's hard for relationship building. And I think I just want to say that because I want to encourage anybody who may feel, we heard from Representative Flowers say, sometimes it's not fun to be the only Black girl in the room, right? To any of y'all that may feel that way for whatever reason, whether it be, your gender or your race or your religion or whatever it is that has you feeling like the only one. I promise you, as small as you may feel, there are people There are other people who want to understand who you are, who want to understand what you believe and why. And as hard as it can be, it is so important to show up and do that work. And just like Representative Gray said, when folks don't understand, it can be very easy to take that personally, but it's all of our responsibilities to not take that personally. It's not about who we are. It's just about a lack of understanding. And so I think it's all of our jobs to just try as hard as we can to understand one another and where we come from. And so I know that that's what a lot of us do try to do in the House, and I'm grateful for it.
Thank you so much for those answers. We have another question from Mrs. West's class in Hot Springs. It's kind of a three-parter, so I'll read it verbatim, and whoever wants to address first, please hop in. How is it different between you and your male counterparts? Is there a big difference? And also, how is it being a woman in the political climate of today?
Yeah, I'll chime in on that. I'll be actually very interested to hear Representative Clowney's comments, because she came in 2 sessions after I did. So I can tell you, when I came in 2015, I know that doesn't sound like it was that long ago. Feels like it was a long time ago. I did feel like I was treated differently. I felt like, I'm going to use the word objectified a little bit. I feel like I was objectified. I was, 30 something years old. And I don't feel like I was taken quite as seriously as my male counterparts that came in at the same time I did. And it took me a lot of standing strong, standing up for who I was and what I believed in, and showing that I was just as capable of doing the same things that they were. Now, where I'm at now, it may just be because of the relationships I've built and my tenure and my experience. I feel completely equal where I'm at. And I've now been an assistant pro tem. This session, we actually have 2 female pro tems out of 5. Up until that point, I had served 2 terms as the only female pro tem. So I think there probably is still work to do, but we've come a long way just in my short tenure.
So it's so interesting to hear you say that. I think that it manifested itself a little bit differently for me. And I don't know if any of y'all have read this research on, I'm a nerd at my core. So there's all of this research on something called modern sexism, which is sort of the view that we kind of now are to the point where we, by and large, trust that women can do the job. We trust that they're capable and they're competent. But we still really struggle society-wide to trust women who are ambitious enough to want to do the job. And so for me, I think one of the biggest challenges as a woman hasn't been, people do question my competence a little bit, but I think that more, what has been more surprising to me, I think, and more just hard. What has been harder for me has been the thought that I think a lot of people have, that when they see women being ambitious or being successful, that they're up to something. And again, this is not just me and my personal experience. This is, the data clearly shows it, that we don't 100% believe women. We don't take them at their word. And so relationship building is harder. I think we have to go sort of above and beyond to prove that we are trustworthy. And that can be really hard and frustrating work. And so just very honestly, that has been a challenge. But I think what has actually gotten to me more has been the desire that some folks have to want to pit women against one another. Hear a lot about feuds that exist between women colleagues that aren't real, because I think people don't believe that women can just really be strong and supportive friends who are cheering one another on. And so one of the best parts of my job has been to be able to show people that it's true, that yes, we really are good friends who cheer one another on. And even, I think that the relationships that I have with women across the aisle are stronger because we share a bond as women. And so it can be a real benefit too. But I would be lying if I didn't say that there weren't some hurdles that I think are placed in our way that maybe aren't placed in the way of all of our male colleagues anyway.
Thank you both for those thoughtful answers. And we've got a few more questions, but I'll hold those until the end. Director Webb, I'll hand it back over to you for our last question.
Okay, is there anything else that you all would like to say about being a woman serving in the 93rd General Assembly? And I'll note that there are only 24 women out of 100 members in the House. And whoever wants to go first.
I'll just say personally that being able to see women who have gone before and just been so, I'm sorry, for lack of a better word, just bosses about the job, two of whom are on this call. So Kathy and Representative Gray, it really is such a thrill to watch y'all and just learn. I still feel like I'm a student at this job. And so, you know, to all of you who are watching this, just, gosh, look at those women who are even just this much ahead of you, maybe in the job, and learn from them, because nothing is as valuable as that. So thanks to both of y'all.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And I tell you, you know, yesterday it was interesting. I was in BLR, which is Bureau of Legislative Research, working on trying to figure out a way to create a pathway for LPN graduation and then be able to sit for their boards by the time they graduate high school. And what I realized yesterday is that's a very, very complicated subject, trying to get to the minutia of it. And I called the former Speaker of the House, Jeremy Gillum, and I'm like, hey, while we're sitting there, I said, Jeremy, you know, help me through this. And he's like, you know who you need to call? Ann Clemmer. And she's a former state representative that worked in higher ed after she tenured out in the legislature. And so we've got, you know, women that came before us that are now affecting policy at the agency level as well. And so it's just really neat watching the women as they progress through. And it's really neat once you've been in the legislature and you see all these executive branches and what all they do. A lot of them then will jump and they'll take that leap into that executive branch where they can still continue to set policy and keep moving things forward and do what's best for the state of Arkansas. So it's been neat for me just to see that continuum.
Thank you. Nate, back to you with the questions.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got a combination from Rustle. Thank you for asking that from our friends on the go. So if you could start your career over, this is to either of you, what would you do differently, if anything?
You know, I guess I'll go first. There are always small things that I think you could do differently. And I wanted to be a physician back in the day when I was younger. And life, you know, sent me different directions. And every single thing I've done in my life, I've been an insurance agent, I've been business manager and VP for finance at higher ed college. I've started clinics. Now I work for a hospital. And every single thing I've done in my life has prepared me for what I'm doing today in the legislature. And it's given me so much experience through different avenues. So I don't think I'd change anything.
Yeah, I agree with that actually. And, you know, my career has been similarly windy. I was a lawyer. I was a teacher. I was a stay-at-home mom for a while. And I think every single one of those jobs has given me a perspective in this current job as a legislator that is really, really valuable. I think it's okay to sort of change it up along the way. I think there's a lot of pressure on kids right now to decide at 18 what's the one thing they want to do for the rest of their lives. And, you know, just, gosh, if you just sort of follow your passions, you'll end up in the right place. And I'm like Representative Gray, I wouldn't change big picture anything that I've done career-wise.
Thank you. And the second part of that question, I'll modify it a bit because I think we touched on a bit of this earlier, but I think a really good way to end our Q&A is what brings you the most happiness in your role?
Okay. I see Representative Clowney, she's quiet, so I think I'll go first. the most happiness in my role, maybe it's twofold. I think the first thing is this job is it can be so deflating at times. And I know Representative Clowney has to be feeling that as well right now. It can be so deflating, but when you get that phone call from a constituent and you're able to help them, and that's, just something that seems so small to us because we're dealing with such big issues, is so important to that constituent. I think that's it for me. And then my daughter, watching my daughter, and I'm going to say this, and this is probably way too personal, but I'm going to do this anyhow. We recently voted on a bill. It was the pro-life, anti-abortion bill. And my roommate, Deanne Vaught, she's a survivor of sexual abuse. And so she and I had a week long of crying and upset, and we had an amendment made for rape and incest. Knew we couldn't get anywhere with that. So driving home one Thursday night before the vote, and I asked my daughter, what do you think, I should do? And she's like, well, you have to vote yes on the bill as it is. I said, so what happens? If you're 12 and you're raped, you don't think that that's something you would think about as an abortion? And she said, Mom, I would have been traumatized once already. And if you forced me to get an abortion, then I'd be traumatized twice. My mouth kind of fell open on that. And I'm like, well, that was not the answer I was expecting. I was expecting her to say, yes, I think that's an option I should have. So I've actually kind of forgot the question you asked me, but, watching my daughter and mature and understand what's going on has been very rewarding for me as well.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and what brings you the most happiness in your role? I think that was the beautiful answer. Thank you. Representative Clowney, did you want to hop in?
I had one of the hardest days of session, I think, for me was this past week. We took a really hard vote on the floor, and it was a vote that impacted transgendered children in our state, and that is an issue that I know there's still so much misunderstanding around, and I think this is one of these things where I personally have lots of transgender people in my life. This is not a hypothetical. This is not a sort of a weird, scary thing, but I understand that there's a lot of folks out there who just don't have contact with transgender people day in and day out. And I think for me, in those moments where I'm able to stand up for those communities, and I will never be able to fully understand, of course, because I'm not a member of the community, but at least being able to say what I can to defend them, to stand up for them. When I got home at the end of the day, I was so frustrated and so sad. And my phone just started blowing up with texts from people saying, oh my gosh, thank you, thank you, thank you. We don't know what we would do, without somebody having said those things. And that's not to overstate my role. I mean, I didn't change the outcome of anything. And I know that my role is very limited, but knowing that at least making people feel heard when they otherwise feel like they wouldn't have is really such a gift and such an honor. And it made what was a really hard, sad day bearable, because those contacts brought me so much joy. So.
What a great note to end our session on today. Just wanted to stop and express gratitude to Director Webb, Representative Gray, Representative Clowney for giving us their time this Friday morning, and for all the teachers and students that are watching live or potentially watching after. We miss you guys. We would love to have welcomed you to the Great Hall, all of you, to have a great conversation in person, take some photos, have some conversations after the workshop. And just thank you to AR Girls Lead for working with us for, I believe this is 3 or 4 years now that we've continued this partnership. So despite the hardships, despite the week we've all had, I'm just thankful that we can keep this partnership alive and keep this partnership going. And for everybody here today, thank you. And we'll be doing this again next year. And we'll be posting this on YouTube for you to watch and share with your friends. So thank you, Director Webb. I'll give you the final word as our moderator today, but I just wanted to say a final thank you to everybody for being here.
Thanks, Nate. And again, I want to thank Representative Gray and Representative Clowney, but also want to thank the staff at the Clinton Center. Nate, you and the other staff members worked so hard, even in a pandemic, to bring these kind of quality educational programs, not only to students in Arkansas, but students outside Arkansas. And we are incredibly fortunate to have this resource right here in Central Arkansas. So thank you, and back to you, Nate, and that's it.
Thanks for joining, everybody. Stay safe, and we can't wait to see you in person.